Every time you eat a piece of tuna, you're actually absorbing the chemical history of millions of microscopic algae. And it all really comes down to this ruthless kind of mathematical rule that governs literally every single ecosystem on Earth. So welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're basically tearing down that fairy tale version of nature. We're going to look past the singing animals and the pristine wilderness documentaries and just replace them with the actual thermodynamic reality.
Yeah, we're looking at a really comprehensive study guide today. It covers the absolute mechanics of ecosystems.
Right.
And this is specifically tailored for you if you're prepping for exams like the TEAS or HESI, or honestly, if you just want to understand the invisible physics running the world.
Right.
We're taking the angle of energy through nature. So we're stripping away the romanticism to look at how matter and energy actually dictate life and death.
And to do that, we have to start with this massive scientific rebellion. The modern definition of an ecosystem actually began as a weapon against the idea of perfect balance.
It did. Yeah, early ecologists, they would look at a forest and see what they called a superorganism.
A superorganism.
Right. There was this American ecologist named Frederick Clemens who championed this idea. He really believed plant communities just sort of march toward a predetermined destiny, like this perfect, mature endpoint he called a climax community.
Like the forest has a mind of its own or something, just trying to achieve a permanent state of zen.
Exactly.
Which, that feels incredibly mystical for a hard science.
Well, it is, and which is exactly what sparked the rebellion. There was a British botanist, Sir Arthur Tansley, and he actually coined the term ecosystem in 1935 specifically to destroy Clemens' superorganism idea.
Wow, just to prove him wrong.
Pretty much. Tansley argued that nature isn't a single entity with a purpose. It's really just a physical space where abiotic factors, sunlight, water, rocks, temperature, interact with biotic factors, which are the living organisms.
Right.
It is a machine exchanging matter and energy. It's totally bound by the laws of physics.
So under that mechanical framework, a forest fire or a massive hurricane isn't a failure of the system.
Oh, far from it. Under that old balance of nature myth, yeah, a fire was a tragic deviation. But modern ecology views disturbance as completely mandatory.
Mandatory?
Yeah. Fires clear deadwood, they trigger certain seeds to actually germinate, and they reset the board for new growth. Disease outbreaks thin herds so they don't overgraze. Ecosystems are inherently chaotic and dynamic.
Which, also makes them incredibly hard to draw a box around. Because if an ecosystem is just a physical system exchanging energy, then a single puddle in an old tire is an ecosystem.
Yeah.
But so is the entire Amazon basin.
Yeah, that's spot on. It all depends on the spatial scale you need to study. The boundaries are just human convenience, really. A researcher might study the ecosystem of a single rotting log, while another researcher studies the entire global biosphere.
Wow.
But the physical laws operating inside that log across the planet, they're absolute. They're the exact same laws.
Which brings us to the rules of the machine. Since we're dealing with physics and chemistry here, there has to be an underlying law dictating how that log or that rainforest operates.
Right, and the foundational rule, the one principle that dictates everything else we are going to talk about today is that energy flows one way, but matter cycles.
Wait, I hear people talk about the energy cycle all the time, though. That's a trap, isn't it?
It is a massive trap, especially on exams. Please remember this. There is no such thing as an energy cycle.
Okay.
Energy enters the system almost exclusively as sunlight. Plants, algae, cyanobacteria, they capture it and turn it into chemical bonds like glucose.
Right.
But as that energy is used by living things, a huge portion of it is permanently lost to the universe as heat. It never goes back to the sun. The trip is strictly one way.
I actually like to picture it like a water park.
Okay, a water park.
Yeah, so the carbon, the nitrogen, the water in the park. He goes down the slide, pulls at the bottom, gets pumped back up to the top, and loops forever. Like, the carbon atom in my arm right now might have been in a T-Rex millions of years ago. But the energy is the admission ticket. You spend it once to get in, and the ticket is gone.
That's a great analogy. The ticket is completely non-refundable. The energy powering your muscles right now will just radiate off your skin as heat and vanish into space.
Wow.
And because matter loops, we rely on trophic levels, which are basically feeding positions, to pass it around. Primary consumers eat the producers. Secondary consumers eat the primary ones. Apex predators sit at the very top.
But you left out the most important crew in the water park.
I did.
The maintenance staff. If the producers are at the bottom capturing sunlight and the apex predators are at the top, who is actually pumping the water back up the slide to close the matter loop.
Right. The decomposers and detritivores. Fungi, bacteria, earthworms.
The cleanup crew.
Exactly. They are the ultimate biological recyclers. They break down dead tissue and waste from every single level. If they stop working, the ecosystem literally runs out of usable carbon and nitrogen, the soil goes dead, and everything starves. They are the mandatory cleanup crew.
Okay, so the matter is handled, but let's look closer at that one-way energy ticket. If energy is constantly bleeding out of the system as heat, how much actually makes it from the grass to the rabbit, and from the rabbit to the wolf?
Well, the brutal mathematical reality was quantified by a young freshwater ecologist named Raymond Lindemann in 1942. He discovered what we now call the 10% rule.
The 10% rule.
Yeah, on average, only 10% of the energy from one trophic level is successfully transferred to the biological tissue of the next level.
Wait, I need to stop you there because that is a staggering drop-off. 90% is just gone. How does a living creature lose 90% of its energy budget?
Well, think about the daily life of a rabbit. That rabbit eats clover. But it doesn't just neatly store that clover as meat on its bones.
Right.
It has to burn energy to keep its internal body temperature at 101 degrees Fahrenheit. It burns energy running away from foxes. It burns energy breathing, pumping blood, repairing cells, reproducing.
Staying alive.
Exactly. Every single cellular action generates metabolic heat, which just radiates away. Plus, the rabbit doesn't perfectly digest every leaf. A lot of potential energy passes right through as waste.
So by the time a fox actually manages to catch and eat that rabbit, only the energy physically built into the rabbit's muscle and fat is available to the fox.
And that usable remainder is roughly 10%. Field studies show it fluctuates, between 5 and 20% depending on the specific organisms. But 10% is the baseline metric popularized in textbooks by Eugene Odum in the 1950s.
10%? That's wild.
Yeah, and his brother, Howard T. Odum, proved this with hard numbers in a famous 1957 study at Silver Springs, Florida.
Oh, what did he find?
He found producers capturing over 20,000 kilocalories of energy per square meter per year. But by the time you reach the top carnivores, only a few dozen kilocalories remain.
The energy literally just runs out.
It does.
That perfectly explains why you never see a food chain with 10 steps. Like a hawk eats a snake, which ate a frog, which ate a grasshopper, which ate grass. You can't have a super hawk that exclusively eats other hawks because there are barely any kilocalories left to sustain it.
Precisely. That energetic depletion creates a very rigid structure, an energy pyramid. It's a massive, wide base of plant energy supporting an increasingly narrow slice of consumers as you move up.
I actually want to challenge that pyramid shape, though.
Okay.
Because if I look out my window at a giant oak tree, I see a single producer. But that one tree is feeding thousands of caterpillars, hundreds of birds, and thousands of beetles. That looks like an upside-down pyramid to me. One tree at the bottom, 10,000 consumers at the top. Does that break the rule?
I see what you're saying. You're confusing a pyramid of numbers with a pyramid of energy.
Oh, okay.
A numbers pyramid can absolutely invert, just like your oak tree example, one large organism supporting many tiny ones. But the energy pyramid never inverts. Never. The total thermodynamic calories locked inside the immense wood, leaves, and roots of that massive oak tree is still vastly larger than the combined calories of all 10,000 caterpillars eating it.
Because you can't violate the laws of thermodynamics.
Exactly.
The energy always decreases, which, that leads to a massive misconception about survival of the fittest. We tend to look at the lion or the shark at the narrow tip of the pyramid and think they are the pinnacle of evolution, like they won the biological lottery or something.
Yeah, but they didn't win anything. They are surviving on the most precarious energy margin in the entire system. Trophic position is just a mathematical reality of energy flow. It's not a ladder of biological superiority. A decomposer mushroom is just as highly evolved and integral to the system as a great white shark.
Actually, being at the top makes the apex predator incredibly fragile. They are so dependent on that tiny trickle of remaining energy that if humans alter the pyramid, the top is the first thing to starve.
Right.
But what happens to the rest of the pyramid when that top layer disappears?
Well, we witness what's called a trophic cascade. The effects literally ripple all the way down to the physical landscape. The classic case study for this is Yellowstone National Park. In the early 20th century, wolves were essentially eradicated by hunting.
Right, they wiped them out.
Yeah, and without their apex predator, the elk population absolutely exploded.
And starving elk eat everything in sight.
They congregated in the river valleys and grazed the young willow and aspen trees down to the dirt. Without those deep root systems holding the soil together, the riverbanks literally began to erode and wash away. The physical shape of the river changed simply because a predator was removed.
Then wildlife managers brought the wolves back in 1995.
Yeah.
And the elk get hunted, they get nervous, and they stop lounging by the river.
Yep.
And the willows grow back. And I remember reading that because the willows grew back, the beavers returned to build dams, which created entirely new pond ecosystems.
Right, that is the widely shared narrative, and it highlights top-down regulation beautifully. I should note, though, that ecologists do debate the perfection of this story.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The actual data in Yellowstone shows a much slower, packier recovery than the viral videos suggest. Ecosystems are messy, and reintroducing a predator doesn't magically fix a century of damage overnight.
Sure, that makes sense.
But the core principle of a trophic cascade is undeniable. Look at Isle Royale in Lake Superior. By 2016, the wolf population there had dropped to just 2 isolated, highly inbred individuals.
2 wolves cannot control an entire island of prey.
They couldn't. The moose population skyrocketed to over 1,000. They devoured the balsam fir forests to the point of ecological collapse. It forced the National Park Service to artificially airlift wild wolves onto the island in 2018 just to engineer the food chain and stop the destruction in real time.
That is intense. We're basically forced to manipulate the thermodynamic engine just to keep it from tearing itself apart.
Exactly.
But altering the top of the chain isn't the only way things break. Introducing things at the bottom can be just as devastating. Which takes us back to the tuna sandwich from the very beginning. If energy decreases by 90% at every single step, why do toxins increase?
That's a great question. Because of a biological paradox called biomagnification. Energy is burned off as heat, like we talked about, but certain heavy metals and fat-soluble chemicals cannot be burned or excreted. A perfect example is the old pesticide DDT. It gets stubbornly stored in an animal's fat tissue.
Ah, okay, so the rabbit burns off the clover's energy, but keeps the clover's pesticides.
Precisely. Let's trace the math on this. An insect eats a sprayed leaf and stores a microscopic speck of toxin in its fat. A frog must eat hundreds of insects to satisfy its basic energy needs because of that 90% loss.
Right.
So the frog absorbs hundreds of specks of toxin. A snake eats dozens of frogs, absorbing thousands of specks.
The predator's desperate need for calories basically forces it to act like a vacuum cleaner for the entire ecosystem's poison.
Yes. By the time a hawk eats the snakes, the toxin is heavily magnified. This mechanism is exactly what Rachel Carson documented in her 1962 book, Silent Spring. The biomagnified DDT was causing bald eagle eggshells to thin and shatter under the mother's weight. It proved that food chains concentrate poison just as effectively as they dissipate energy.
Which is why this isn't just like an abstract wildlife issue for a biology exam. The exact same mechanism dictating the bald eagle's survival dictates human public health.
Absolutely. The biomagnification of mercury in our oceans operates on the exact same thermodynamic math. Microscopic algae absorb trace amounts of mercury from the water. Small fish eat massive amounts of algae. Larger fish eat the small fish, all the way up to apex marine predators like tuna or swordfish.
So when a nursing professional advises a pregnant patient to limit their consumption of swordfish to protect fetal development, they are literally applying the 10% thermodynamic rule to hospital dietary guidelines.
Yeah.
The physics of the food chain is sitting right there on the patient's chart.
It really is. It also governs global agriculture. The concept of carrying capacity, how many humans the Earth can sustainably support, is totally bound by this math. Because 90% of energy is lost at each step, it requires vastly more land, water, and solar energy to produce a pound of beef than it does to produce a pound of grain. Eating lower on the food chain is thermodynamically much more efficient.
We've been talking about straight lines this whole time. Grain to cow to human. Or algae to small fish to tuna. But real life isn't a straight line, is it?
No, not at all. The linear food chain is really just an educational tool to simplify the math. Reality is a highly complex, overlapping food web. Almost no organism relies on a single food source, and almost no prey is hunted by only one predator.
Which is a good thing, right? That biodiversity provides redundant pathways for energy to flow. Like, if a disease wipes out one species of grasshopper, the frog can just pivot to eating crickets. The web makes the whole system resilient to shocks.
Exactly. Working ecologists analyze webs, not chains. The web represents the true complexity of the physical machine.
Okay, let's lock in the core mechanics we've uncovered today, especially for anyone tracking this for their entrance exams.
Let's do it.
First, energy is a one-way ticket. Permanently lost to the universe is metabolic heat, while matter perfectly cycles endlessly.
Right.
Second, the 10% rule means the vast majority of energy is lost at each trophic level, which keeps food chains incredibly short.
Yep.
Third, decomposers aren't just an afterthought. They're absolutely mandatory to close the matter cycle.
Crucial.
Fourth, the desperate hunt for scarce energy causes toxins to biomagnify in apex predators. And finally, real nature is a complex web where removing a single piece can trigger massive physical changes to the landscape itself.
You got it. Understanding these underlying mechanics completely strips away the fairy tale, but I think it replaces it with a deep appreciation for how intricately the engine is actually tuned.
It really does. I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to chew on. We talked about how wildlife managers had to airlift apex predators onto Isle Royale to stop the exploding moose population from eating the forest down to the bedrock. Think about our own species. An ecosystem's carrying capacity is strictly capped by the thermodynamic loss of energy. We can artificially boost producers through agriculture, but we can never ever escape that one-way loss of heat. What does that mean for our position in the global food web? Are we the ultimate apex predator, carefully managing the system? Or are we dangerously close to becoming the unchecked moose on the island? Nature isn't a static painting, it's a relentless physical engine. And we are inside it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you.